Make your bargain. Meet your fate. Make it worth it.
Okay, hi Sasha, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. Nice to have you here. So I know you're here to promote a book, and how many do you have published at this point?
This is my third. I have one series that's complete with two books, and The Rose Bargain marks the start of a new series for me.
Okay, are they all in the same genre?
They are. They all are young adult historical fantasy.
Before we get to your books, though, I'm reading just your about the author, and it says that allegedly your house has two ghosts, although you have yet to see them. And your house is 100 years old. It looks really good for 100 years old.
She's well built. Yeah, so I moved into this house in August of this year. And the woman we bought it from lived here for almost 40 years, and she was deeply attached to the house. And she told me after all of the paperwork was signed, oh, by the way, you should know about the ghosts, which is not what you want to hear once you've purchased a house. So she said there's a man upstairs and a woman downstairs. She did not clarify how she knew that, but she said to keep an eye out for them. And we've been here since August and have not seen anything. So I wonder if the ghosts followed her to Oregon.
Okay, so you said the woman you bought it from had lived there for 40 years?
hmm
So were the people that were there before her, is that who she's seeing?
Unclear. So the lore about this house is, I guess, that I live in downtown Salt Lake City, pretty close to a trail, and the trail used to be the railroad. And so these were all old railway employee homes. And so maybe the ghost of like a grizzled old railway worker and his wife, perhaps, but I never got any details. I would love to know more.
Well, interesting. I mean, how does one find the history of a house like that? Is it public record or?
I'm so lucky in that the woman who lived here was a real, historian, and she was so passionate about the house that she passed along all of these records to me. But it was kind of a passion project of her own, which I loved. And she had read my first series, which takes place in 1911. And so she wrote me a letter after we purchased the house. And the house was also built in 1911. And she's kind of a woo-woo person. And she said that she knew the house was meant to be mine because of the 1911 connection.
Well, this is why I was pursuing this line a little bit, because I thought that maybe your house could be good fodder for another book series if you could
if
find
the
out more details about it.
if the ghosts would like to show up and give me some plot points, I would be very amenable to that.
I also see you're going to be doing a lot of events. And are all of these, let's see, Tuesday, February 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th, one's in Utah, one's in California, Tennessee, Georgia. So you're going to be all over the place. So these meet and greets, book signings, all of the above, yeah?
All of the above. Yeah. So I'm in conversation with some fabulous authors all over the country. So Stephanie Garber in California, Casey McQuiston in Utah, Hannah Whitten in Nashville, and Rebecca Ross in Atlanta. And, we'll chit chat for 30 to 45 minutes about books and writing, and then take audience questions and, sign books and get to meet everybody. And it's one of the coolest parts of my job, getting to do these kinds of events, because writing is so solitary. And so to get out into the world and realize that there are real people out there reading my books and connecting with my work honestly never gets old.
So these are live events that the public can come to, right?
Absolutely. All of the information is on my website, sashapeysmith.com, if you want to come. They're all free to attend. And yeah, in the United States and England, I'm doing 4 events in England as well, which is going to be so fun.
Oh, when are you going there?
Immediately after. So I leave this upcoming Friday directly from Atlanta to London. And my mom is meeting me, and we're going to have a great time.
Well, best of luck on that.
Thank you.
And so the new book is called The Rose Bargain, which I think is a clever title. Takes place in Victorian England, you know?
Yeah.
Now you said young adult. What is that age group?
So young adult, it's typically, 13 to 18-year-old readers, though I think a good story is universal. A lot of adults read these books where the main characters are teenagers. I feel like I never quite grew out of like a good teenage love story. So while the target audience is teenagers, I have a pretty wide variety of ages in my readers.
Okay, and you said your other book series is done in the early 1900s.
Yeah. There's something that I love about connecting fantasy and history. I was kind of a history obsessed kid. I was like, the kid on the playground with the macabre book about the Titanic. And, I always loved picturing people in history, and to combine that with my love of fantasy novels and think about, the premise of this book is, what if the Queen of England was a fairy? And getting to combine real historical events with these fantastical premises are such a fun, sandbox to play in, and such a fun starting place for a novel.
Is that what happens in this? Queen Victoria is a fairy?
So not Queen Victoria.
Oh.
So, but Queen-esque. I purposefully set it during Queen Victoria's reign because of the idea of a woman in charge. But the prologue of this book opens during the War of the Roses, the English Civil War in 1471. And the real War of the Roses ended with, a York on the throne. But in my version, a fairy strides out onto the battlefield, makes a bargain, and tricks her way onto the British throne. So it's now been 400 years, and all of the citizens of England can go and make fairy bargains with her. But all fairy bargains come with a cost.
Who are the main characters in this book?
So our main character is Ivy Benton. She is 18 years old, and this will be the season that she debuts in society. She is, like other girls of her class, supposed to go and make a bargain with the Queen to help her find a husband. So something like, a talent for piano in exchange for your happiest childhood memory, or a smaller nose in exchange for a toe. But Ivy has been disgraced by her sister's recent scandal, and so she does not have very many prospects going into this social season. The Queen announces that this is the season that her son, the fairy prince, will take a wife, and Ivy is the first to enter that competition. So she's vying for Prince Bram's hand, but his brother, Prince Emmett, has some political ambitions. He would like to take down the Queen, and he thinks that Ivy can help. So she finds herself torn between these two princes and falling for the one she's not supposed to be falling for.
Would you like to have lived in that time period or not?
No, I like the romanticization and the fantasy aspect of it. I love, writing a ball gown and, writing a carriage ride, but I have terrible vision. I wouldn't have been able to see anything. I love modern medicine and modern plumbing. I love being on my phone. I'm way too addicted to the internet. So no, I don't think I would have done very well in history.
What about that debutante thing? Because I know that actually continued on. I don't know if they still do that, but I know it continued on until the late 50s, early 60s, and then the sexual revolution in the 60s sort of put an end to that. But it was still going on in America, up in the upper classes of people. And essentially, it was just girls that turned, 18? And they were sort of paraded around like a dog and pony show.
Like literal merchandise.
Like merchandise on display.
At this time in England was called literally the marriage mart. It's funny you say that. So my dad grew up in Alabama, and his mother was on the board of their local cotillion. And my dad owned a tuxedo because he had to be an escort so often for these girls that were, coming out in society. And it was going on at least as far as the early 2000s, because when I was 16, I remember my mom being like, did you want to go debut? Like, I grew up in Utah, but she was like, did you want to go debut in Alabama? And I was like, no, that does not sound fun to me.
So that was still going on in when? The 2000s? Really?
The 2000s, yeah, it would have been the mid 2000s. Definitely more as like a tradition than an actual introduction to the marriage mart, but still happening.
So it wasn't a swap meet.
No.
Well, it's funny how things changed over time, because I can remember as a young man having a conversation with my grandmother, who was born in the early 1900s. And I said to her, what did you want to do with your life? And she said, find a good man who was a good provider. That was the only ambition she had. Now, if a woman said that, you'd think there was something wrong with her. That I don't think that you could have that in addition to, a career or something, or a stay-home mom is fine. But just the language that she used was odd to me.
Yeah, that's something I find so interesting about writing historical fiction, particularly these, fantasy books geared towards teenagers with a pretty strong feminist bent and really powerful female main characters, is I purposely set them in worlds where women had very little options and upward mobility in terms of social power or financial power. And exploring what that really meant for the women that were living in this time period has always really fascinated me. And putting these kind of subversive, powerful characters that are challenging that system has been really rewarding for me to explore. But I remember my grandmother was born in, the 1920s, and my sister and I went to go visit her in her retirement home. And there's a very sweet old man who was probably in his 90s sitting in a wheelchair in the entrance. And my sister was, maybe 20. And he looked at her and he went, "Young lady, are you married or do you have a job?" And she went, "I have a job." And he went, "Good for you."
Well, like she couldn't have both, right?
She could not have both. It was out of the question.
Well, it was also very interesting that back then they married much younger. I mean, my grandmother was 16 when she married my grandfather, who was 18, and everybody thought that was wonderful. Can you imagine a 16-year-old daughter saying, "Oh, I'm going to get married now"? I mean,
thank goodness I didn't marry any of the boys I had crushes on at 16. I had terrible taste.
I mean, it's almost unheard of. People would
Yeah.
the parents would fall to the floor if their 16-year-old high school daughter said, "Oh, I'm getting married now."
Absolutely. I think that an extended childhood and the gift of choice are so recent. And, we would be doing, our mothers and our grandmothers and our great grandmothers a disservice to forget how hard they fought and how recent it was that, women had such little power. Women could not have a credit card in their own name if they were married until like the late 1970s.
And women couldn't vote until the 1920s. So
I'm 32 and my own grandmother was born before women had the right to vote.
yeah, it's unbelievable.
It's crazy.
We've got just about 2 minutes, and I want to make sure that we get all of your books in here. So we've got The Rose Bargain. You said that this was the beginning of a new series. How many books do you anticipate are going to be in this series?
Just 2, and I turned in the first draft of the second one last night. So people hopefully will not have to wait too terribly long for it.
Okay, and the first series is called what?
It's called The Witch Haven, also just 2 books, The Witch Haven and The Witch Hunt, and they are out now wherever books are sold.
Are the 2 series related at all, or are they completely different?
Not at all, completely different.
Okay. How are they as far as standalone? Like if somebody bought the second book, would they be lost?
They'd be pretty lost. Yeah. The first one wraps up enough that if you aren't interested in the second one, you're getting a complete story. But picking up the second one, I think that you would be pretty confused as to who these people are and what's going on.
And are you planning on a third series?
I am noodling on a couple of ideas. I have to complete the contract for this book first. So I'll work on the sequel over the next, 6 to 8 months, doing edits and figuring that out with my editor. And then I have a couple of new ideas kind of stewing in the back of my brain crock pot, but we'll see what my agent thinks I should write next.
Well, if the ghosts appear in your house, that should do it, right?
If you see a ghost story from me next, you'll know that the ghosts made an appearance.
All right. Well, Sasha, I think on that we're going to wind this down. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
The new book is called The Rose Bargain. You said it's been released?
It comes out in the United States on February 4th and in the UK on February 13th, wherever books are sold.
Okay. Last question. Could you just give out your website again, please?
Absolutely. It's Sasha, SASHA, Smith.com.
All one word?
All one word.
Again, nice meeting you, and best of luck. And I don't know if I want to say I hope you see the ghosts, or I hope you don't. I'm sort of on the fence with that one.
Honestly, I feel the same way.
Well, we'll just have to wait and see what happens,
I'll come back for the sequel and give you a report.
Oh, beautiful. Okay.